welcome back to the channel. We're out at the little greenhouse. Lots of plants sitting outside. Rhubarb, coneflower, a whole bunch of coneflower propagations, Egyptian walking onions. We got some comfrey and some chamomile. So those are probably going to survive any temperatures that we see forward unless we have a really hard frost. So I can throw a blanket or some type of tarp over top of these to cover them up if we have any cold temperatures in the foreseeable future. But we have a lot of warm weather on the way. But this morning was about 35 degrees. We're sitting about 35 this morning, so that's not really that cold for an overnight temperature. We're having about 60 to 70 degrees today, so it's still quite chilly out here right now. My nose is running, I apologize, but wanted to come out in the little greenhouse because I don't really film out here a whole lot. Most of our content is coming from our large greenhouse, so I wanted to come out here and check everything out. We've got so many plants, chicken feather in there, in our lavender. We've got a lot of new shoots coming up, so we've got a lot of food out here. Our lovage is mixed in with our cilantro. It doesn't quite look the same, but the cilantro is good for eating. I absolutely love cilantro, and I always just keep a good batch of it here. Got some chives. These are just going crazy. I harvested these probably 2 weeks ago, maybe a little bit longer. Got to really come through and cut these back. So I've got lots and lots of little propagations just every little corner of the greenhouse. So I want to go through. You can see these mulberry trees. This one's upside down. That's not good. So you can see that the one got stuck upside down. My kids helped me get all these situated. So see if we can't get that going upright. But you can see that all of these are just throwing tons and tons of leaves off there. I've been having great success with these. You can see the actual buds in the light there. Really green stuff, and we've got maybe 50 cuttings in there, and we just take advantage of all of those little trees growing. And this little area we have about 50% shade cloth up here, maybe 40-50% shade cloth. About 90% of the plants go down to the big greenhouse, I should say. So some of them are propagated down there, but most of them are started down here. And I really am not liking these cups. Look at that nasty mold on there. That's so gross looking. But my plants, my rosemary and this row of lavender up front here, I have all these rosemary, they're doing well. My stevia, I've had maybe a 25% success rate. I got all this lavender up front, did well, but the stevia did not like being propagated right here. Maybe it caught a little bit too much early morning light because the sun's just getting up here. We don't really have any heat sources running other than the compost water running through, because our compost air is pretty well crushed. I got to put a new tube on that. So we did have good residual overnight temps. We have these black buckets full of water, and those pick up a lot of heat during the day, and then those are kind of like a heat sink. I usually have 2 layers during the middle of winter, but we're in early spring here, so I am getting all of these propagations going. And these little rose cuttings here, mini rose bushes, all came from this rose, and we propagated that with our aloe vera, and I had a video on propagating that. Got a little bit of our marshmallow herb, or marshmallow root. Really wanted to show everybody the abundance of propagations. Now these just sat, and I kept filling this and emptying the bucket out over the last couple weeks with snow. So I took these cuttings maybe 3 weeks ago, and I've had these in here, and they've got some decent water in there. That water stays pretty cool. It doesn't get a whole lot of direct sunlight during the day. And the shade cloth keeps it a lot cooler in here also. These plants are obviously in a good way, and they're in a good situation. So I wanted to get some of them thrown in the dirt. We've got these ones back here sitting in the dirt. We've got some of our Asian pears. You can see they're throwing little buds off of our Asian pear. We've got right over here the rest of our stevia. So I trimmed this all the way down just to invigorate growth. I threw a whole bunch of compost on and then top dressed some soil over top. So this is really invigorated with growth now, and I'm going to be able to transplant a few more cuttings out. I can see that I've got a few decent stevias, but not nearly as what I wanted. I wanted at least 20 stevia plants so I could have those for the market. So that's a setback right there. So I have lots of rosemary and all types of other herbs coming up. So that is a good thing that I spread that diversity out and spread the risk out amongst many crops, because I don't always have success. So we had a little dry spell in here, and then I overwatered, so you can see a little bit of molding on some of the leaves. But we've got all these cabbage, lots of blue kale, more cabbage, all of these are going to get potted up. We've got tons of cells to transplant out of this little greenhouse, and we will pot some of these up for sale and to transplant for ourselves. But for the most part, all of these are going to go outside the greenhouse. We do them in these little cells to save all of the space. You can see how much we've got and how much we pack in here, and if all of these were in small cups like this, we wouldn't be able to fit nearly as many. So we've got all of these little cells started, all of this Swiss chard. These will be transplants going out outside the greenhouses here. Lots of crops coming up, lots of crops that didn't do so well. I think this was a really dark and cold corner for tomatoes in, so we've got lots of abundance of different varieties of tomatoes in here, and I wanted to come check this out. I got my Nanking cherry just sitting up on top of the aquaponics. Check out this aquaponics. You can see this purple coneflower. Now this is what the actual tuber looks like on the coneflower, and this is a very beneficial herb and plant and flower. So it is a healing herb. I've got a few of them here. This one's got a little more developed leaves, but that tiny little tuber shot out all these roots searching for water. Stuck all these mint in here. You can see all those roots pop out. Kind of dig those back in the water here gently. We've got a few tomatoes that are just doing well in here. They like the water. There's a lot of nutrients in this water because we haven't really changed it. It's just been sitting. So we did have fish in here last season. These strawberries are doing well too. Very cool stuff. Just kind of stuck all these onions in here to mull over until I plant them out. So lots and lots of propagations coming up in a very shady greenhouse. So I'm going to call this my little shade house. Move my Nanking cherry back to the floor. So even this little Nanking cherry is doing very well. Now we don't really have any buds coming out outside. Some of our in-ground plants, some of our perennials and our very cold hardy perennials are coming up, like our purple coneflower and our comfreys and mints and stuff like that. And we're able to kind of pull a little bit of that and propagate it in a warm, shady area like our greenhouse, our shade house here. And we're able to produce a lot more of those very early on. Like all of those coneflower I have outside the greenhouse were propagated in this way here. So I've got some of my Bocking number 14 comfrey. This is Russian comfrey. I can take and divide this up into 20 little slivers, plant each little sliver into a pot, and that will regrow. In this little swamp I've created over here, I've also got all these coneflower. Now this was just a huge cluster, and all of those individual coneflowers I have growing were basically just pulled and basically divided. All these little tiny pieces. You can take every single one that has a shoot and a bulb at the bottom with a little bit of root, and you can split that out. We could probably make about 20 of them off this little cluster here. Just kind of leaving those in that little swamp I created, a little bit of muddy water, and those will just rejuvenate, and I'll be able to transplant them and they won't die on me or dry up in the meantime. So they've got a nice shady warm area. Being able to have this area for things like that and to be able to pull all of those perennials up early really helps me out. Like all of this mint, like all this mint was basically just a little strand, and none of it had any roots, none of it had any growth on it, and we've got harvestable mint. We can propagate all of this mint. We can take tons of cuttings and stick them individually in here and make about 50 mint plants off of what we just put in here, and we'll get all these potted up and we can throw those outside too, because those are a very hardy plant. I've got this rhubarb in here that's kind of throwing some roots off and a little bit of new growth. I'm just setting him on top of the rocks so he doesn't get too wet there. Having a little wet land or a wet area like this aquaponics area definitely allows me the time and affords me the area to get all of these rooted up without having to put them directly into water, and I'm able to propagate much more, much faster. Of course, the shade cloth is the #1 factor in this. The 50% shade cloth really allows all these plants to really boost up growth, and they're not really under that harsh sun. So that harsh sun can stop and stunt and burn the plants when they're really fresh like this. Like some of our jalapenos that were sitting out on the edge here were catching some sunlight under my shade cloth, so I had to lower my shade cloth on this side because they were getting burnt up. You can still see one of them's a little burnt, and then some of our plants were getting extra dry. It is a very tricky time to be able to propagate all these plants and get a whole food forest going and propagate a whole farmer's market out. And that's why we've got our large greenhouse also. So we're able to propagate all these out and have a good outlet for all of these propagations. Like I said, we outgrow this greenhouse very, very quickly. So I wanted to share my thoughts on a shade house or a shady greenhouse to be able to propagate and to have the area for all of those fresh starts. All of your cuttings are going to like a very shady area, nice damp shady area. Like I said, I really don't like these disposable pots because they're starting to biodegrade too early, but I guess where they're covered in soil, they're not, because I have soil down in here. So I don't know, I just really don't like those. I like my cells to be able to propagate and then allow roots to go right through. So I just tried those little biodisposables because I found them very cheaply. So if you're taking cuttings, all of them are going to be needing a very shady area for the first month of life or so, because they're going to need a dull filtered sunlight to be able to propagate those roots and to be able to throw root growth off while being able to throw vegetation off while being a fresh stick. You know, they don't even have roots yet. So being able to get roots growing on all of these, just like the rosemary and all of the smaller cuttings, those are very large cutting compared to these, but we're getting all of these going in a very shady area, and that is the key. So this shade house is a propagation station, and I feel like everybody should have one. Anybody's got any questions? I've got a lot of planting to do. I've got to get my chickens put up so they don't tear all my plants up outside here. They've already been looking at my pots out there, so I've got to get all these potted up and try and get them outside. Spring has been coming on pretty darn early for us, so it's just hard to keep up with all of the weather up and down and the tornadoes rolling through. So we just got done cleaning up all the mess from that and getting back to our greenhouse propagations and planting out our farmer's market. So I'd like to thank everybody for watching, and if anybody has any questions on this little greenhouse, definitely drop it in the comments below.